All right. Well, thanks for clicking play there and joining us for our conversation with Ned Ryun. Ned is the founder and chief executive officer of American Majority, which trains, candidates and activists across America. Do I say conservative candidates and activists, or how do you prefer that be described?
Freedom-loving potential leaders in the public arena.
Okay.
Obviously, very much focused on the state and local level. I'm a big believer that the national generational change begins at a state and local level. And in many ways, Mike, I'm just trying to replicate what progressives did 120 years ago, in which really the progressive movement started as a state and local reform movement, percolated, and then built from the ground up. And by the time they really got into power, with both parties, by the way, progressivism is both Republican and Democrat. Really in that 8-year period between 1912, 1920, completely fundamentally changed our government in many ways, our society. So American Majority looks to really replicate and reverse engineer what progressives did, and not only identifying and training good men and women to run for school board, for city council, for county commission, state house, state senate, but also train activists on how to be more effective in changing their local communities. And enough local communities change, state change, enough states change, you change the country. So we've been doing this since January of 2008, over 13 years now.
Do school boards too? Doing a lot of work regarding school boards lately?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is one of the things. It's been pretty funny, especially in the last year here, especially in Virginia. I'm in Western Loudoun County, which is obviously ground zero for a lot of the school board issue, not only in Virginia, but the country as well. And somebody came up to me, this was just about a month ago, and said, you know, you were about 10 years ahead of the curve when you started talking about we as conservatives need to actually take school board races seriously and become involved in running people and taking over school boards, just to make sure we don't lose our grip on the future generation's education. Sadly, not enough people took that seriously 10 years ago. So here we are, in which we have radical left progressives who have realized the immense power that they have and the ability that they have to actually shape, and I would say indoctrinate future generations with their very twisted leftist ideology.
So let's just finish out two little bio. You work for George Bush. What did you do for George W?
I did. I was there 2001, 2002 as a presidential writer. People always think I was a speech writer. There were 6 speech writers. There were 6 presidential writers. Obviously, the speech writers did speeches. We did special correspondence and proclamations. And interesting time. Obviously, was there on 9/11. Interesting day. You know, it's one of those things, Mike, that as you look back, you realize there are a lot of disagreements on a variety of issues inside the Republican Party. And boy, I got to tell you, I identify more as a Donald Trump Republican than I do a George W. Bush Republican.
Okay. Well, we can do another show on that. I guess this show,
Yeah.
or whatever, conversation,
Yeah,
is really on that. And maybe we'll get back to that without those names on it at the end. You have a new book called The Adversaries.
Yeah.
I plan on buying it, but can you summarize it for me? And
Yeah, I'll summarize it really quick. My first book was Restoring Our Republic, which was nonfiction, more on where did the founders find the inspiration to construct our republic. But the second book is The Adversaries, a story of Boston and Bunker Hill. And really it began, I've always been fascinated by the life of Dr. Joseph Warren, who was a young Harvard-educated doctor, protege of Sam Adams, one of the main organizers in the resistance to Parliament and the King's ministers in Boston leading up to the Revolutionary War. In fact, was president of Provincial Congress, became a major general in the new army, literally days before the Battle of Bunker Hill. People have asked, you know, why does Ronald Reagan call him one of the greatest of the founding fathers in his first inaugural address? But most people don't know about Joseph Warren. Not to ruin the story, because it's a phenomenal story. Yeah. You know, he dies that day on Bunker Hill. So I wanted to bring him back in many ways to remind people this is a great life. Dr. Joseph Warren was a singular man, and we could use a lot more Joseph Warrens right now in America in 2021.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, you know what? I think I might get the book. It's available on online booksellers.
Yeah, you can go to Amazon and grab a Kindle or a paperback, hardback with maps coming out probably by Christmas time. Been getting really good reviews, and it's historical fiction, Mike. I call it faction because a lot of this is recreated off of journals and speeches and eyewitness accounts. but I color the edges a little bit, but I would say 90% of it's true.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Where do you find time to write a book in between
Uh,
training American?
you find it at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Before the kids wake up and you have to get them ready for school. You find it on airplanes. You find it in hotel rooms. You find it sitting at your son's football practice. It's amazing if you're really motivated how you find time to do things that you
Yeah.
really want to accomplish. And
Yeah.
I really wanted to write this, but it became one of those things, honestly, Mike, where you realize we're not given all the time in the world, and you can think about certain things or you can actually do it. And so I decided I'm going to do this. And so I did it.
Yeah. Well, that's great. All right, let's talk about, and this is why we have you on, Ned, because this caught our eye among all of your work, but in particular, an American Greatness article piece last month.
Yep.
Title of which is "The Stupid Money on the Right Rides the Grift Train." And we do the giving review, so we are willing and enthusiastic about talking about stupid money, including on the right. Is all how much money on the right is stupid?
Well, I got to tell you, this is something I've been involved in the conservative nonprofit movement in a very serious way for 13 years. Right, beginning of American Majority, January of 2008, and it was something that pretty quickly became apparent to me that I really thought we had issues on where our focus was, what we were funding. I started writing a book called The Racket 10 years ago. I was told by certain people if I continued down that path, it might disrupt some of my funding. But it's something I've been thinking about for 10 years and writing about. I mean, this is my latest piece, but I've written about it off and on over 10 years. I would say, based off what I can see, Mike, in annual giving between federal and state, we're probably putting $500 million to $1 billion into C3s and C4s every year in what I call the center-right ecosystem. I would argue that we have misplaced priorities and misplaced funding in a variety of ways. And I understand there's disagreements, obviously, inside of the movement where we should be putting money. I'm of the opinion that until we actually have the power to implement our policy ideas, all we're doing is having really good conversations about what ifs. Whereas the left, who I quite frankly steal ideas from all the time in regards to tactics and strategy, while adamantly opposed to their policy goals, these guys are very good at organizing politically so they can be in the right place to implement their policy. And this is why at American Majority Trainings, I say politics is policy in many ways. Unless you're in the right place to actually implement policy, again, all you're doing is having good conversations. So why don't we on the right actually start to do some of these things that will put us in these positions to actually implement the right policy? It means we have to completely rejigger some of our thinking and how we approach where we're putting our money, our time, and investment so that we can be in this position. Because one of the reasons I write these pieces, Mike, because I feel so strongly that we as a country are in deep danger, right? As you look back at the founding of this country and the Constitutional Republic and understand the founder's vision, I would argue we're actually living the progressive dream right now. We might use some of these same terms: constitutional republic, separation of powers, federalism, all that. I think that's a happy fiction in many ways. And I think it's time that we wake up and have an honest conversation about what do we hope to accomplish in the next 5 to 10 years. And if we continue to do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3 to 4 decades, I think that's the definition of insanity. I think that we have overinvested. And again, some people don't like me saying this, but I guess in some ways, Mike, when you start to get older, you just start saying, I need to say these things at some point. I think we have overinvested in intellectual ammunition. And I think that's necessary. Don't get me wrong. And sometimes people mistake me when I say these things. We need intellectual ammunition. You definitely need that. At the same time, an overinvestment into think tanks and white papers, again, all we're doing is having great conversations with no systematic approach to finding implementers for those ideas. And so I hope that kind of gives people a little perspective on where I'm coming from. And I think it's time, and I've had these conversations with people in which I really want to address the donor community and ask them, what are you hoping to accomplish? Are you hoping to see real victories in reality, in which there's massive change, or what are you actually investing in? And I think the thing that's been a little crazy to me, Mike, over the last 13 years, these people were very clearly very sophisticated and smart in how they made their money in private business, right? There's a reason that they're donors, because they've been successful. And yet somehow there's a detachment between, I think, their approach in the private sector and then in their nonprofit charitable giving that, quite frankly, is a bit mind-boggling to me. Because if they had had the same approach in their private business that they have in their nonprofit giving, they would have gone bankrupt years ago.
Why don't we end part one there and then come back with part two in a bit here?
Yeah, that's fine.